going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. As always, I am the DM, and today we're talking about Steam. Most ubiquitous name in video games. Full stop. It is so ubiquitous with video games that even people who are not or who are not gamers have heard of it. And today, I wanted to talk about this. Now, this has come out about 4 days ago, as of recording, and this has come out from Kiro 7 News. Now, I don't know who Kiro 7 is, at least not as a news platform, but this one says that lawsuit claims Bellevue-based Valve's Steam platform stifles competition and overcharges consumers. Now, anyone who has been in the gaming space for more than a year, I would say, is well aware of Steam's practices. In fact, they are probably one of the most egregious forms. They take a very large cut of any of your net profits, unless you make like over 1 million sales or something, at which point then you get a 70-30 split or something in your favor. So in this article, it starts off with Valve Corporation is facing a class action lawsuit alleging that it has unlawfully monopolized the PC gaming market, according to documents filed in U.S. District Court of the Western District of Washington. The lawsuit, brought by plaintiffs John Elliott, Ricardo Camargo, Javier Rovira, and Bradley Smith, claims that Valve has used its market dominance to impose unfair pricing practices that have harmed both consumers and competition in the gaming industry. Now, this is nothing new. In fact, I should have brought this up before I started recording, but let me bring up something real quick. I finally found an article covering it. So, Epic undercuts Steam with new store that gives devs more money. So, a long time ago, Tim Sweeney in the Epic Games Store allowed for developers to bring their products to their storefront. They would get a payment for it and all that. And one of the things that was so startling and revolutionary for this is this right here, the Epic Games Store revenue split. Now, you can see UE4 on Steam, 65-30. Unity on Steam, 70-30. Whereas on Epic Games, it's an 88-12. And 12%, Tim Sweeney, in fact, let me just reopen a few of these because there was actually there was a tweet that I had up that I probably should have left up, but I didn't. Here it is. So right here, Tim Sweeney says, yes, the Epic Store's operating costs for most transactions are in the range of 5 to 7%, covering payment costs, payment processing, download bandwidth, and customer service. Which means that they get anywhere between 5 to 7% profit, or a kickback, essentially, right, from games sold on their store. Now, this was massive. This was huge. This was talked about everywhere. And I've seen absolutely no one talking about this, so I figured I would. And this is why, right? So, to say that they are stifling competition is an understatement, because the entire reason that Tim Sweeney did this was specifically because of the lack of any kind of competition in the space, right? No one else could really afford to have this type of like revenue split, because Steam is just so massive, right? They can afford it, right? Now, this lawsuit has brought this up in the actual courts. Now, I'm surprised at how long it took for someone to actually bring this up as a class action lawsuit. But it finally has. So, they accused Valve of excessive fees on game sales and in-game transaction, which inflated consumer prices. Valve allegedly maintains its dominant PC gaming market by imposing restrictive agreements on game publishers. These agreements, known as Platform Most Favored Nation clauses, which I think is a weird name for it, but they prevent publishers from offering lower prices or better content on rival platforms. So you can't, for example, you can't take your game bippity boppity boo, put it on Steam and Epic, and then put a discount for 50% off on Epic and not put it on Steam. Essentially, you have to put it on both. You also can't give like Epic exclusives, right? So another way to put this into perspective is Pokemon, right? So in especially the early Pokemon games, like Pokemon Blue and Red, for example, there were Pokemon that were exclusive to that version. You could not get them on any other version unless you traded them, right? So effectively, what this would do would be like Valve telling Pokemon that they're not allowed to do that. That all Pokemon must be available in all on all versions of all of their Pokemon games forever, right? They have to put all of their Pokemon in every single video game, right? Which essentially, like, you might say that, oh well, that sounds really good, until you think about the fact that like Pokemon Sword and Shield, for example, if that were the case, then they would have to include all like almost 1,000 Pokemon into that game, right? They would have to put every single one into that game before they're allowed to release it, before they're allowed to do anything with it, right? That's essentially what they're doing here. Now, according to the lawsuit, this practice stifles competition and forces consumers to pay higher prices for games and in-game products. And this is very true, because take the Pokemon example for bringing that back up, right? So Pokemon Sword and Shield, if they had to put in all of the Pokemon that they've ever created, that means that the development time would be significantly longer, right? Because they have to create new models, new animations. They have to put in all of the Pokemon moves. They have to make sure every single one actually works, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it would essentially almost double the time that it takes to make Pokemon Sword and Shield, just to add the extra Pokemon, right? Just because of how many there are, right? And it's very unrealistic. And so they would say, the Pokemon company would essentially just stop making new Pokemon, right? Or if they did make new Pokemon, they would make like maybe 7 to 10, right? They would make a very small amount and then release the next game, right? And there also wouldn't be very much innovation in terms of graphics, right? Because if you update the graphics, let's say you go from 2D to 3D, then you have to create all new models, create all new animations, create all new attacks, create all new textures, you have to create all these new things all from scratch, right? And that's just going from 2D to 3D, just for an example, right? But even going from like 2013 3D to modern day 3D, you have to upscale the resolution. You have to make the models larger to add more polygons. You have to do all these things that require more time, right? And if this kind of policy were from Valve was applied to the Pokemon Company, then the Pokemon Company would just not do that, right? They just wouldn't do it because it would cost too much money, and they wouldn't get enough in back to actually justify the costs, right? And that's essentially what this is doing. And so for newer developers, smaller developers, especially indies, they don't have that kind of money. They don't have that kind of time. So rather than putting it on both stores, they just go with one store, Steam. Why? Because Steam has the significantly larger player base. Their storefront is more advanced than Epic Games, and so they're just going to go with Steam because it's not the better store in terms of revenue, but in terms of accessibility, in terms of the number of players that they're going to get to actually come to play their game, it's a lot better to put it on Steam. The plaintiffs argued that Valve's practices have allowed the company to sustain a 30% commission on game sales through its Steam platforms, a rate that they claim is far above what would be expected in a competitive market. This is also very true. Again, coming back to this, in a competitive market, Epic Games, like, hands down, offers a better deal. Full stop. There's no possible way you can argue this. There's no possible way. right? Developers 1000% get a better deal on Epic, but they still go to Steam. Why? Because of market dominance. They simply have the lion's share of the market. Full stop. There's no way you could actually argue this. Let's see. They also assert that Valve's control over in-game payment processing further entrenches its monopoly, as the company requires all in-game transactions on Steam to be processed through its own payment system. The lawsuit seeks public injunctive relief, damages, and an end to Valve's alleged anti-competitive practices. This case could have significant implications on the PC gaming market, as it challenges the business practices of one of its most significant players, one of the only players. Let's get this straight here. Let's set the record straight. It's one of its only players. There are exceedingly few actual storefronts that are in any way, shape, or form anywhere close to being competitive with Steam, with Valve, right? The outcome may influence how digital distribution platforms operate and how prices are set for games and in-game content in the future, which it absolutely should. Okay, so let's go over this last little bit real quick. So they assert that they have control over it, and it further entrenches their monopoly and requires them to go through their payment system, which is 100% true. This is exactly what they do. I don't have any actual evidence of this or any background proof or anything, but I'm pretty sure when you make a purchase through Steam, it technically adds it to your wallet and then pays the developer, right? It gives them their cut, right? Their 65% or 70% or whatever, right? So yeah. Meanwhile, Tim Sweeney has confirmed that their 12% still gives them a profit, right? Because it's in the range of 5 to 7%. Now, granted, this was 4 years ago, but it still is true, right? Like, I doubt, because from my knowledge, they haven't changed these at all. So, there's that. Now, again, I've not seen anyone talking about this, and it's actually absolutely baffling. And the reason why it's baffling is not only because it's Valve and, it's the most ubiquitous storefront in gaming, but also because recently there was a court ruling that deemed Google to be a monopoly. That they are a 100% convicted monopoly. Get the fuck out of here. So a judge ruled on Monday that they have maintained an illegal monopoly in this online search, and this is because they have paid a shit ton, billions of dollars. I'm sure it's down here somewhere. They paid billions of dollars to become the default search engine on things like Android, Firefox, all these other browsers and services and whatnot. And as a result, the judge has ruled them as an actual monopoly, right? And so this is why I'm actually really surprised that no one's talking about the fact that Steam is being accused of being a monopoly. Just a few days after Google was. And I've seen no one. I'm subscribed to, like, Yong Yeah, I'm subscribed to Philip DeFranco, Sid Alpha, Some Ordinary Gamer. Mudahar even did a video on the Google monopoly. But no one has talked about the lawsuit against Steam. Why? Why aren't you talking about this lawsuit that could completely change the video game digital distribution marketplace? Because this affects not just Steam. This doesn't affect just the PC market. This affects Microsoft. This affects Sony. This affects everyone. Because if it's ruled that they are an unfair monopoly, right, and they are forced to slash their cut, right, down to being a fair, competitive market, right, then This means that if anyone else is caught being above what is considered a competitive market, a fair competitive market, then that means that those people are a monopoly, that they're running a monopoly. That is what this will mean, right? So let's say they cut their profits down to 12%, just like Epic Games, right? Then let's say Sony keeps their market cut at 20%, right? And Microsoft keeps it at 25%. Well, then Microsoft is the first one that's going to get hit with a monopoly lawsuit. And then if Sony doesn't change after that, then Sony will also be getting hit with a monopoly lawsuit. I guarantee it. 1,000%. This sets a precedent. This lawsuit sets a precedent, right? And this was brought by just 4 people, right? By just 4 people brought this. Now, I don't know who the fuck these are. I haven't actually looked into the lawsuit or anything. I probably should. But this is what this means. This has massive implications for the video game industry and massive implications for digital distribution of, I'm going to say it, not just video games, but anything and everything that's distributed digitally. Anything that has like this kind of pricing where the developers only get a small fraction and whatnot, like compared to how much money they rake in, right? Then it's wild. And before I end, there's one last article, one last thing that I want to bring up to kind of solidify what I mean. All right, so this, I believe, is from the court filings because it was filed yesterday. And this is Exhibit 16, right? It was some information redacted, right? So this is from Tim Sweeney himself to Gabe Newell himself, right? And this Eric Johnson, as well as some other people that, you know. So, actually, I think Eric is one of the people that is... no, it's not. Okay, anyways. So it starts off with saying, "Hi, Gabe. Not at all, because Gabe asked him, anything we doing to annoy you? We're guessing that Sean Jenkins' public dumbness might be part of it." Now, what he is referring to, I'm not sure. I did a quick search, couldn't find anything. So I don't know what exactly he's referring to here. But he says, "Hi, Gabe. Not at all, and I've never heard of Sean Jenkins, so whoever it is, Tim Sweeney has never even heard of it. Generally, the economics of these 30% platform fees are no longer justifiable. There was a good case for them in the early days, but the scale is now high and operating costs have been driven down. While the churn of new game releases is so fast that the brief marketing or UA value, I don't know what UA means here, value the storefront provides is far disproportionate to the fee." So he's talking about this, right? This is what he's talking about. If you subtract out the top 25 games on Steam, I bet Valve has made more profit from from most of the next 1,000 than the developers themselves made. These guys are our engine customers, and we talk to them all the time. Valve takes 30% for distribution. They have to spend 30% on Facebook / Google / Twitter, UA, or traditional marketing. 10% on server, 5% on engine. So the system takes 75%, and that leaves 25% for actually creating the game. Worse than the retail distribution economics of the 1990s. So what he's saying here, right, is so Google or Steam takes 30%, right? So that leaves 70% of what the game is sold as that goes back to the developer, right? So then they have to spend 30% effectively on marketing, right? So that takes 60% out. So now they're left with 40%. They have to spend 10% on the server, so that takes it down to 30%. And then 5% on the engine, so that takes it down to 25%, right? So they make 25% of what they're selling it for. So if an indie game is selling it for, let's say, $20, right? That means that indie developer, when they actually get a check for an actual amount, they're getting $5. They're making $5 off of that $20 game, right? So the like Dave the Diver, which I believe is like $20, $25, something like that, they aren't actually getting a lot of money. They're getting $5. Now let's say you are selling your game at $10, right? That means you are getting $2.50, right? And that's in American dollars, right? That's in freedom units, USD. That is almost nothing, right? So to put that into perspective, right? So let's say Dave the Diver. In fact, I'm going to do this. Dave the Diver sales numbers, right? We're going to do this live because I like to do this live, right? So Dave the Diver Steam charts, right? So it's got about 7,000 players in game, and its all-time peak was this. So we'll take this number, right? And we will multiply that by, we'll say, $20, right? So now we minus the, and what was this made in? Was this made in Unity? Okay, so this was made in Unity. So that means they get 70%, right? So minus 30%, right? So it cuts it. So Steam right there just made $600,000, right? For doing nothing, essentially, right? So you look at this number, it's like, wow, they made almost $1.5 million. But then you have to minus the 30% fees, right? Then you have to minus, let's see, what else was it? Let's see, 10% fees, right? Then you have to minus the 5% fees, right? So in reality, they made less than 900,000, right? From this. Now, granted, 825,000 still a lot, right? It's still a lot of money. However, one thing that Tim Sweeney doesn't say in here, right? He's talking about like traditional marketing, server size, engine, etc., etc. What he doesn't talk about is the developers. He doesn't talk about how much it costs to pay the developers, right? So let's see. Dave the Diver was made by Mint Rocket. So let's look up Mint Rocket, shall we? Mint Rocket games. Now, Mint Rocket, let's go to their actual about page, right? Mint Rocket is not a very large company. They're very small. They're an indie team, right? So let's see, Mint Rocket. How many developers? Probably not going to get anything from this, but how many developers work at Mint Rocket, right? Or even how large is the Mint Rocket company? Right. Okay, so we're not going to see anything. Okay, so they made $3 million. So obviously their profits are going to be a lot bigger than this. And this is, of course, using the data from an indie game that absolutely blew up, right? This game absolutely fucking blew up when it was released. And so that's what he's talking about here. So there's a lot of costs that are just associated with it that aren't talked about, right? So obviously he talks about it, but he doesn't talk about all this. So anyway, so the system takes 75%, leaves 25% for actually creating the game. Worse than retail distribution economics in the 1990s, which is not wrong. That is worse. We know the economics of running this kind of service because we're doing it now with Fortnite and Paragon. The fully loaded cost of distributing a game is less than $25 per game in North America. In Western Europe, it's under 7% of the gross amount that you make. So I believe the question of why distribution still takes 30% on the OpenPC platform on the open internet is a healthy topic for public discourse. So Tim, a lot of people like to prop Gabe Newell up as like the savior, when in reality he's not. He's not. He might have been once upon a time, And he was when like Half-Life came out, when when Steam first released, he was the savior of PC gaming. It was amazing. It was enormous. But nowadays, he is not the savior of PC gaming. He is the devil. He is the antithesis of what he started, right? And now Tim is the actual savior because of flatly Epic gives a better deal. They do. So, this is what I wanted to talk about. I've ranted for 25 minutes. I was intending to only rant for about 15 minutes. But, anyways, that is all I have for you today. Thank you all for stopping by my corner. I have been the Deem as always. And I will see you all next time.